initial application, it's a lot of paperwork. You answer a lot of unique questions. So you'll go through that application. It's very paperwork intensive. And most applications are denied. So over 2/3 of applications are probably going to be denied.
2/3 get denied?
Yeah.
If I'm working in a factory and tomorrow I get injured on the job or somehow get disabled, get a medical condition, and I have to put it through this long paperwork process to be able to get my benefits that I've been paying into. And it takes close to a year to actually get a decision on that before I can even, and then 2/3 of those are denied?
Yeah. Yeah,
Wow.
it's insane. It's a really, really tough system for, the system that was designed to help people that can no longer work or they're disabled in both. It puts a lot of burden on them. And while you're waiting, you can't really be working because of that SGA limit. If you work at all, it's going to hurt your claim just in general, even if you are only making $500 a month. So they're asking the disabled to sit around for not just a year, it could be up to 2 years, to not working, not really doing anything, and just waiting for a determination.
Welcome to episode 13 of Boston Barristers. We're starting a series where we talk to attorneys from other areas of the law. And a lot of times we talk about guns here, we talk about criminal defense, immigration, all of that stuff. But today we have Ned Melanson, who is an attorney, talking about Social Security and disability, something that I don't know anything about. I know that I have to pay into it, but that's about all that I know about it. So I'm excited to dive into it, and you can kind of demystify it for us, Ned.
Yeah. Hi, Matthew. Really excited to be on your podcast here. It's been great getting to know you in the Boston legal scene. And, you've been a mentor for me, and, hoping to, shed some light on the mysterious program that is Social Security disability for, your audience and the greater Boston and broader community.
Okay, yeah. So before we jump into it, tell me about you. So where are you from originally? I see a map of Maine in your background there.
Yeah, we're at the home office right now. I don't have the fancy books behind me, but yeah, I'm from Maine. I was actually born in Massachusetts, moved up to Maine for high school, and came back down to Boston for law school. So, I still keep Maine close by, but just a big fan of New England in general, and love everything about it, from the beaches to the mountains to the great city of Boston. Even though I do live in Cambridge, which is right across the river, so it is a separate city. And yeah. I don't feel superior that I live in Cambridge.
I don't know if you have to say that, but yeah, I went to law school in Cambridge, so yeah, I'm familiar with it.
There you go. I did not. I went south of the Charles, so I guess we're even.
So tell me about your firm. You work with your dad, right?
Yeah. So I've done a few different things with my legal career. I'm about 5 or 6 years into it, and I started at a large Boston law firm. I worked at a cybersecurity tech startup, and then eventually I found my way to starting a law firm with my father. His name's Jack Melanson, and we'd been kind of batting the idea around for a while. Both being lawyers. It seemed like a natural fit, and he spent most of his career, as a Social Security disability administrative law judge. So that's my mouthful, but it's ALJ for short. That's basically, and we'll get into this, that's the person who's probably going to be deciding your Social Security disability claim. So he spent 17 years as a judge, and he saw over 5,000 or 6,000 cases. And then he retired, and then, I don't know if he was getting a little bored in retirement, but or maybe just wanted to show me the ropes. So we got together, we started a disability firm, and we started that at the beginning of 2024. And it's not, we don't do like massive caseloads, but, we've helped quite a few people get their benefits essentially. And it's been really cool to see, taking someone on when they're kind of at a low point, where they've been denied and they don't have an income, or they're struggling with housing or something like that. Taking them through this really, kind of crazy process that can take a really long time, this crazy bureaucratic process, and getting a successful decision for them is a really great feeling. So it's definitely a very different area of law. But I do some criminal defense as well, and the only thing I can compare it to is when you tell someone we're getting you out, you're free today. So it's a similar sort of feeling that you don't really find in corporate law, for instance.
I mean, I think the best feeling is that 2-word verdict in criminal defense, right? Is it
Yeah.
so? It's kind of like that when you can tell them, hey, maybe it's a call and say, hey, we got your benefits, right?
Yeah,
They
it
would,
is, it's a little different, but it is the sort of relief off the client. Even, they're not sitting in jail, but they are kind of sitting with a pile of bills, or they're sitting with an eviction notice, or that, how do they care for their kid or something like that, and they can't work. So yeah, it is really, it's a cool feeling to be able to help someone like that. It's a unique area of the law in that sense, to be able to kind of give people that kind of, economic security after
definitely.
they've kind of told you their whole life story, and sort of the medical issues they've been dealing with. It can be very heavy, but it can also be very rewarding.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm familiar, and we're going to go over the top 10 things that somebody needs to know if they're facing this, but I want to start with the basics. So I'm familiar with Social Security. I'm familiar, you pay into it, and it's supposedly a retirement program that will hopefully exist by the time you and I retire. But what is that mostly what you focus on, or is it the disability part of it? Can you kind of give me an overview of what we're actually talking about today?
Yeah. So most people know about Social Security retirement benefits. We're all it's taken out of your paycheck, and it's talked about a lot. It's a program that, to get a little historical, it was a program that was started, around the Great Depression, because there were so many old folks that were just in dire poverty. But then there was this realization that people work their entire lives, and they can work jobs that can really beat up their bodies, or basically things just happen, and you don't always reach retirement age kind of in good health, and
Yeah.
it can be really hard to reach that retirement age, and the retirement age is always going up for various reasons. And so they created this program called Social Security Disability Insurance, which you also pay into. You might not notice it because it's not as big of a piece on your paycheck, or it might just be kind of lumped in with what's known as the FICA taxes, but you pay into it a couple dollars every month, and it is an insurance program. So it's not like a welfare, you know, sort of, nothing against welfare or anything like that, but you do pay into it. So these are benefits that you have earned over the course of your lifetime of working. And it's a protection in case you are no longer able to work. That's how it's designed. And it was really, the real purpose was for people that were approaching retirement age, 50, around 50, even though that doesn't seem that old, today. Back in the day, that was like, a lot of people were working in factories and that sort of thing. So you're approaching 50, 55. They realized they needed this sort of bridge program to get
Hmm.
people to retirement when maybe their bodies weren't up for the task of work anymore.
Okay, so let's go ahead and jump right into it. What is the number one thing people need to know if they are, have a Social Security disability? What's the number one question you get, I guess?
I think one of the first things you want to know is that there's actually two programs within Social Security Disability. There's SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance. That's the program I was talking about. The way to think about that
Federal
is
government loves their acronyms,
they
don't
love
they?
their acronyms. Yeah, I think the military is just even worse than that. But it's not that level. But so SSDI, disability insurance. So that is the program where if you are working and you're become sick or injured and you can no longer work, that's the program for you. That's what you want to. That's what you want to apply for. SSI, supplemental security income, Social Security supplemental income, is a different program. That is a welfare program. So you do not
Hmm.
need a work history. You do not need to have worked a day in your life to qualify for SSI, for supplemental income. So they are two different programs, but they're administered by the same, the Social Security Administration, and you can actually qualify for both of them. You can get both. SSDI is going to be a larger payment. It's going to be a more secure payment. SSI has a lot of strings attached, and I can get into that. But the way to think about it is if I've worked for a long time and I can no longer work, I want to do SSDI. If I have not worked, or I have a very checkered work history, I've worked here and there for various reasons, SSI is going to be the program for you. And then, if you qualify for SSDI, you potentially qualify for SSI as well. And I can get into the finer points.
Yeah, definitely. So SSDI is, the D stands for disability, and SSI is what does that stand for?
Supplemental income. So it's, yeah. Social Security supplemental income.
And is there
Um,
an age limit for either one of those things?
no, there's a cap. I mean, there's you can't be collecting retirement benefits and get disability benefits at the same time. So that's basically your retirement age is sort of your cap, and there's like some specific rules around that. But I would say broadly, the broad way to think about it is your retirement age is sort of the cap. And but you can be there's programs for children. There's disability insurance programs for children. SSI is
Huh.
available for people of all ages. So um, yeah, it can really with children, we can get into that as well too. But there's all these different rules as to how they could qualify. If you're a parent on Social Security retirement, your child automatically qualifies for disability insurance if they are disabled. So
Huh.
yeah, that's why it can be really helpful just to talk with an attorney about, hey, what are my options here? Um, because there's sort of programs within programs.
And so both of those things are different from the retirement Social Security that we get when we're 65 or whatever, right?
Yeah, 65, or you could take it early at 62 or 63, or you could take it late, 67, and I think that age is getting bumped up. It'll continue to get bumped up. So yeah, your retirement benefits, once those kick in, you won't really qualify for disability anymore because it is sort of that bridge program. Um,
Okay.
but it can be a great way, if you're 55 and you're trying to figure out how you're going to retire, it can be a really good program.
So both of these are basically intended for before you get to retirement age and get
Yeah,
retirement
before you get to
benefits.
retirement age, you can no longer work due to a physical or medical impairment.
Okay. So before I forget, if people want to have any questions about this, or they kind of think that you might be able to help them, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Yeah, so my law firm website, melansonlawgroup.com, it's got all the info you need to reach me. My phone number, the phone number on my website, it goes right to me. So
Oh,
if
wow.
you want to, we'll probably hire an assistant soon, but right for now, it goes right to me. And I pick up the call. I talk to people all the time, and even if I can't help you, I'll tell you if I can't help you, or if you might want to seek a different attorney. Um, but but yeah, feel free to give me a call, and I'm happy to have a 10-minute conversation with somebody um, about disability and their options.
So melansonlaw.com and
MelansonLawGroup.com.
melansonlawgroup.com.
Yeah,
And what's that phone number?
617-683-1983.
All
And I'm
right.
Ned, so ask for Ned. You'll probably get me.
All right. So, so the first thing, we talked about SSDI versus SSI. What number two? What's the second thing do you think people need to know about these programs?
There's a few things in like sort of the jargon, but there's work credits and there's the SGA limit. And basically, work credits is how much you've worked in the past that has been reported on your taxes, and then that you get a work credit for 1 quarter of work. So if you think about the fiscal quarters, there's 4 fiscal quarters in a year. It's pretty similar with work credits. So you need to have 40 work credits in order to qualify for Social Security disability income. Um, and there's, if you don't work for a little while, or you don't report taxes, that can kind of hurt you. But if you've been working for, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and if you've been working for 10 years, you definitely qualify. So if you've been working for a good amount of your life, you don't really need to worry about the work credits as long as you've been paying taxes and you're making, over 30 or $40,000 a year, then you're definitely going to qualify. It gets, and it gets kind of nitty gritty if you have more of a checkered work history, and people have checkered work histories for a number of reasons. But a disability attorney like myself, I'm not really going to be able to. It's really you have them enough or you don't, and you can actually find out yourself through the very fun Social Security website. So it's actually something you can do on your own. I'm not going to say it's going to be fun or easy, but you can find out through your myssa.gov account, myssa.gov. There's like all this info on there. You log in with your Social Security number, and you should be able to see like your work earnings history and how many work credits you have, whether you qualify for disability. So when I tell people, there's this kind of like magic formula with the work credits, but if you feel like you've worked a lot in your life, don't worry about it too much. And if you think you're kind of on the edge, I would try and find out through the myssa.gov account, because an attorney isn't going to be able to help you as much with that sort of.
So you need 40 generally work credits?
40 work credits.
You get one per fiscal quarter, you said, right?
Yeah. So I know it sounds like about like 10 years of work, but it doesn't necessarily equate to that, and you can kind of get away with less. And honestly, because I've had younger individuals, I've people that are like 27, 28. So maybe they started working at like 17 or 18 and they maybe got those work credits just in time. But that's why I think you want to check, because Social Security, there's a lot of sort of voodoo that goes on in the background. And even as an attorney with their calculations, I'm always like, how do they come up with these numbers and that sort of thing? So it's always better to check rather than to try and do your own sort of calculations, Googling this, Googling that, trying to do spreadsheets and all that. Just go onto your account, check, go into your local office. That's kind of a whole different ordeal, which we can get into. But
I'm sure it's the peak of efficiency, right?
It's only getting worse, unfortunately. So I think that, the work credits, it's an important piece, but the way to really boil it down is that if you've worked for a decent amount of time, 6, 7, 8 years, you're probably going to qualify for SSDI.
Okay. Today's episode is brought to you by the Law Office of Matthew W. Peterson. If you're facing legal trouble in Massachusetts, whether it's an OUI, a firearm charge, or even just a clerk magistrate hearing, the stakes couldn't be higher. This isn't the time to go at it alone. You need more than just a lawyer. You need a legal team that knows how to fight and knows how to win. That's why people across Massachusetts turn to the Law Office of Matthew W. Peterson. With years of experience in criminal defense, family law, and immigration, we've got the track record and the passion to defend your rights. We've successfully represented clients in some of the toughest situations out there, from first-time offenses to serious felony charges. We've helped people protect their record, their families, and their freedom. So don't wait until it's too late. Visit mwpetersonlaw.com to schedule your consultation or call 617-295-7500. That's mwpetersonlaw.com and 617-295-7500. Because when your future's on the line, you deserve a legal team that's all in. Stay informed, stay legal. Now, back to the show. So if you said you acted like it was kind of a strict cutoff. So if I'm thinking about getting disability insurance or I want to look into it, and I look on the Social Security website and I find that I have 38 work credits, are there any options for me?
So you have to have the 40 to get disability insurance. That's the bare minimum. So you're going to want to look into SSI, into supplemental income, because you'll still qualify for that if you're disabled. So that's where we can kind of talk about the SGA limit, which is the substantial gainful activity.
This is number 3. So this is number SGA, 3. We got another acronym, SGA.
Yeah, the acronyms just keep coming, and there's all these kind of vocational medical terms that you have to learn, but at least your attorney should learn, so maybe you don't have to worry about them so much. But the SGA, the substantial gainful activity limit, that applies to SSI. So it doesn't really matter as much for SSDI. It comes into account in a different area, but I'll focus on SSI for now. So for SSI, SGA is important because if you make over a certain amount of money per month, it's I think like $1,700. And if you make over that amount in a month, you're not going to qualify for SSI, because SSI is a welfare program. And here's another jargon term for you. It's means tested. And that means that it's a welfare program targeted at very poor individuals. And if you're making it's a lot. It's like food stamps, essentially. It's very equivalent to food stamps. So if you're making more in a certain month than the food stamp limit, you're not going to qualify for food stamps. It's the same thing with SSI. Like if you're disabled but you're making $3,000 a month, you're not going to qualify for SSI.
So you can work some and still be on SSI, but there's a limit. Basically, did I get that right?
You technically got that right, but there is when we talk about what work you're allowed to do while applying or on disability, it gets very into the weeds, because even though technically you can work under the SGA threshold, there's a risk that working will hurt your disability claim, because a disability claim is often going to go in front of, it's a very bureaucratic process. So you're going to be going in front of non-lawyers and non-doctors for a long time as you go through the process. But eventually, you're going to, and nothing against them. They're working hard and they do their jobs. But eventually, if you get denied a few times, you're going to go in front of an administrative law judge. And so that administrative law judge is a human. They're going to look at your entire file, and they have rules that they have to follow. But at the end of the day, they're still human. If they see you've been working a good amount while also trying to get disability, it could hurt your claim, even if maybe
Okay,
it
so
technically shouldn't.
does any sort of income count? So if you have like rental income or like non-working income, does that count towards the SGA limit?
Yeah. There's a whole list of things that count and that don't count, and you'd be surprised some of the things that do count. I would say more often than not. Um, for instance, you can't even have more than $2,000 in your checking account in a
Oh,
bank
wow.
account. Yeah, you can't have more than $2,000 in stocks or something like that. And it's all combined. So if you have $1,000 in stocks and you have $500 in your checking account, and then you have $500, $600 in cash in your piggy bank, you're over the wealth limit. And so I'm actually kind of mixing up the two. There's sort of a wealth cap, which is $2,000, and then there's the SGA. So you can't be making more than $1,500-$1,600 a month, but your actual wealth, your net wealth can't be over $2,000. So it's a very, very strict
Wow.
issue or limit. And I tell people all the time, I'm like, you gotta account for anything, and that includes rent. So if you're living with somebody and you're not paying rent, you're getting an in-kind rent contribution. So that goes towards
Wow.
it. Yeah. So it is like super, super strict. It's not impossible. It sounds really onerous, and it is, but a lot of people get on SSI because unfortunately a lot of people are truly in poverty, and it's not like you have to, I don't know, burn things or throw money away or something. Like, there are ways to kind of demonstrate that you are in poverty and that you need this program. For instance, like with a disabled child, we helped somebody last year, this young man who was under 18, and he had a special needs trust. So he could get money from put money into a special needs trust, which would sort of shelter his income, keep him below the SSI threshold. And then that special needs trust, he can take money out of that to pay for like his physical rehab appointments, or pay for, I don't believe he was wheelchair bound, but he may have used sort of specialized crutches. So pay for those sort of things. So there are, even though it's a very strict limit, there's ways that you can kind of structure any income that you're getting.
Okay. So we have the SGA limit, which only applies to SSI. And I guess I just have a more general question. So if somebody is thinking about applying to one of these programs, they want to know whether they qualify. I mean, I've seen these on the back end where somebody finds out that they shouldn't have applied, and by way of federal indictment, which obviously is the worst case scenario. But if they're thinking about it, can they come to you and say, Ned, please help me do this? Is that kind of what the general practice is for you?
I don't do it. I mean, there are some firms that help with applications. I sometimes help with applications. My firm operates a little bit leaner than other firms, and our specialty is really appeals. So people often come to me when they've been denied at some stage in the process, and there's quite a few times you can get denied. So you do your initial application. You probably wait 7 or 8 or 9, maybe 12 months at this point, and then you get a decision back on that initial application. And if you get denied, as many people do on the first time, you can file what's called a reconsideration. And this is go ahead.
Yeah, we should get into that later. I guess I just wanted to know. Because I think that's one of the other numbers, right?
Yeah, in terms of who, who should and shouldn't apply, I think the first question to ask yourself is am I disabled? Do I have a medical impairment that is going to keep me out of work for a long time?
So that's let's talk about number 4 then. So tell me about the sort of medical conditions that qualify you for SSDI. And is it the same for SSI or?
Yeah.
Okay.
While the work requirements are different between the programs, the disability determination is the same sort of process. So,
okay. So tell me about the kind of disabilities that somebody has to have.
Yeah. So you can, and there's actually, there's a whole range of things. There's physical disabilities, there's mental disabilities, there's chronic conditions, there's the result of workplace injuries. anything you can really think of could potentially qualify you for disability insurance. There's actually things called listings that the Social Security has listed out. There's tons of them. There's I don't know if there's 50, 60 or more, but these are things like cancer, Parkinson's, ALS, seizure disorders, certain mental disorders, and kind of like the list goes on, like back issues. And if you meet the specific criteria for those listings, like if you have cancer, and I forget what the cancer listings are, but if you have cancer and it meets certain things, like it's spread to like multiple, it gets really into the nitty gritty, spread to like multiple organs or something like that, you essentially automatically qualify for disability.
Okay.
Most cases aren't going to be brought in through that sort of listing method, but it is good. It gives you a good idea of like what Social Security kind of considers disabilities and what they don't. And these medical impairments, we see a lot of issues with backs. So people that have degenerative disc disease, or they have uh, disc bulging, or something like that, or this thing I learned about when I started called spondylosis, and it's like a narrowing or widening of this the spinal cord, and so anyways, it's basically, it could be any medical condition that a doctor says through a diagnosis, you have this condition, like you are diagnosed with X, Y, or Z, and it's going to keep you out of work for like a year or longer.
Hmm.
That's going to qualify. So as long as, I think, a doctor or a medical professional has diagnosed you with something, and it's truly going to keep you out of work for a long time, you're in the clear. You're not going to get a federal indictment. You might not get disability. They might find that you're not disabled, but you're at least being honest, and in not just making something up if you have that medical diagnosis and it is truly keeping you out of work.
So you mentioned medical, can it in mental health? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So mental health qualifies for Social Security disability insurance, but I won't lie, it is harder to get Social Security disability insurance or SSI with a pure mental health claim. There's a lot of reasons for that. I think, it's a bit of old school mentality, and seeing
Hmm.
as mental health as not being as sort of legit or provable as physical health, because, if you have cancer, like boom, there are the tests right there. There are your symptoms. It's all right there. There's nothing that can be faked or subjective. Mental health is obviously very subjective. And so
Yeah.
judges and disability determination administrators, they look at it with more scrutiny. Now, we've been successful with a few mental health claims, but I think there has to be something unique or especially severe about your mental health claim. This isn't my opinions about mental health or anything. This is just
Yeah.
sort of the way the system works. But if you just have a diagnosis of like generalized anxiety disorder or depression, oftentimes that's not going to be enough. They're going to find that that's not enough. But if you have something like, we had a client who had like agoraphobia, and they couldn't leave they couldn't leave their household without basically having a panic attack. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, so that's something that, a judge can kind of look at and say, "Oh, wow, there's no question here. This isn't subjective. Like, this person literally can't leave their household." So, but really, a lot of times where mental health comes in, it's sort of in addition to a physical claim. So if you have like severe back problems, you've been dealing with back pain for 20 years of your life, of course you're going to have depression. And that sort of amplifies your claim. The judges will look at that in the whole and say, okay, they struggle to work not just because of their back pain, but because of their depression, which may have been caused by their back pain and the inability to exercise or something like that.
Okay. So it can be a medical issue or a mental health issue that could,
Or both.
or both, that could lead to a disability. I mean, is there any other basket of things that people could have, or is that pretty much cover is
Yeah, I
it
mean,
physical or mental, right?
yeah, it's physical or mental, but I mean, there are some sort of gray area conditions that you would say traditionally they would be hard to put in a physical or mental bucket. Um, there's things like fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome. I just heard about a person who's suffering from functional neurological disorder, so I need to go research that after this podcast. Um,
Okay.
Seizure disorder, which is physical, but very influenced by the mental. So there's a lot of kind of gray area there, and there's kind of new conditions and conditions that 20 years ago they didn't have a test for, and now they have tests for. So the disability administration has sort of had to make determinations about, okay, is this gonna be an impairment that we fine for? Like, are we gonna give people disability for this? This didn't exist 30 years ago, or it existed and people didn't have a diagnosis for it.
Right.
So there's been a lot of sort of battles over things like fibromyalgia, um, about whether or not people should get disability insurance for that, and
So,
ongoing battles.
so if generally people, you go to your doctor, you got to have some sort of diagnosis for this, and then they do the initial application. So let's move on to number 5. So how does the initial application go, and how often are people successful in those?
Yeah, so the initial application, it's a lot of, as you can imagine, a lot of paperwork. You answer a lot of, Social Security has very unique questions. They're going to ask you questions about your work history, about your medical history, who your doctors are, what your diagnoses are, basically every employer you ever worked for, and not just that, but did you sit and stand a lot at that job? They get very into the vocational nitty gritty. So you'll go through that application. It's a very paperwork intensive. And most applications are denied. So over 2/3 of applications are probably going to be denied. And
Is this for SSI and SSDI, or is there a difference?
For both. Yeah.
2/3 get denied.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's tough, and it's a long time from your application submission to when you get an initial determination on your application, and it could be up to a year sometimes, maybe more like 7 or 8 months, but I've heard people that it's taken a year.
So I just want to. So if I'm working in a factory and tomorrow I get injured on the job or somehow get disabled, get a medical condition, and I have to sit through this long paperwork process to be able to get my benefits that I've been paying into, and it takes close to a year to actually get a decision on that before I can even, and then 2/3 of those are denied.
Yeah. It's
Wow.
it's insane. It's a really, really tough system for, the system that was designed to help people that can no longer work or they're disabled, and both. It puts a lot of burden on them. And while you're waiting, you can't really be working because of that SGA limit. So, if you work at all, it's gonna kind of hurt your claim just in general, even if you are only making $500 a month. So they're asking the disabled to sit around for not just a year, it could be up to 2 years, and we can get into the appeals process, but sit around for a year or two, not working, not really doing anything, and just waiting for a determination. So it can be very cruel, honestly, and it's really tough. And it's why I talked about at the beginning of the podcast about sort of the relief that people get, because when they call me or they call my dad, they've been in the process for a little bit. They've been waiting for a year and a half, 2 years. So when we're able to finally help them and have a successful decision, it's like a long time. There's a lot of history there that we've come into.
So let's say after waiting for all that period of time, and what do they expect you to do during that? Like, you can't work, you are disabled. Like, I mean,
I honestly don't have a good answer for that. They expect you to just be like this, I don't know, non-moving, non-human, just sort of entity that waits around for, sitting perfectly still, waiting around for a disability adjudication. And like, so there's, we can get into this later, but there's things called activities of daily living that they look at. So they don't just look at your work history or medical history. They look at how you operate day to day. Like, are you doing the dishes? Are you doing laundry? Are you cooking food? Those are all factors in your disability determination, unfortunately. Like, and that's where like a good lawyer can help you is if you are, we had somebody who we had a successful claim for, they had a heart condition, but the judge had denied them initially because they sort of kind of doing small projects around their property. They lived in a rural part of New England, and they were doing sort of small projects just around the house. And so we had to argue that this doesn't equal just because you could do like, make a birdhouse over 5 weeks. That doesn't mean you can work a job, competitive employment at a competitive pace.
So you can't
So
even have hobbies. I mean, you can't have
that's why
hobbies that
someone's able
require
to have a
any.
hobby and get their disability. Thankfully, through some strong lawyering, but no, that's it. I hate to say it, but yeah, hobbies can hurt your claim. Driving can hurt your claim. They ask if you have a license and if you drive. Working is like the worst thing. If you're working, then you're probably going to get denied. But even if you make those, even if you meet those criteria, you still face an uphill battle. So it's not to say that I don't want to discourage people from applying for disability, because it can be a great program and it can be a godsend for people who need it. But there's just a lot of hoops you are going to have to jump through, and it's going to be hard for probably 2 years to get it. And a lot of the people that we help and that are successful, they have people supporting them, or they have people helping them, their family, their friends.
Yeah.
And so if you're going at this alone, it's really hard, and you have to rely on government benefits that are, as we've seen, being cut. And so I don't want to like discourage people, but I just want people to come at this from like a very clear perspective that having a medical condition itself is really hard. And the government makes it even harder to get the disability benefits that you've paid into.
Yeah.
There's a lot of reasons for that. We can get, that gets a little political, but
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'll leave
So
it at
let's
that for now. Yeah.
so let's say I've got the doctor. I've waited for my application. Been sitting there not building any birdhouses for that year long, and I get denied. Number 6, like how long do I have to appeal? What's that look like?
Yeah, this is probably the most important thing you can take away from, if you're watching this interview, this is the most important thing you can take away. If you get denied your first time or any time, you have 60 days to file an appeal. It's really easy to file an appeal. You don't even need a lawyer to file an appeal, but it's basically a one sheet of paper that just says, I want an appeal. And you got to file that within 60 days of being denied. Now, you do have a tiny buffer. It's technically 65 days after you get denied, because they allow for some postal. If they send out something on the 5th, it doesn't get to you until the 10th. But just, I think 60 days is a good thing to remember. So if you get a letter in the mail, you want to file, or you want to call an attorney right away, either or. Because if you file that appeal on time, then you kind of preserve your rights. And if you don't file, they're very, very strict about kicking you back to the start of the process. So 9 times out of 10, if you don't make it in that window, you're going to have to file a whole new application, start over.
And start over with the whole waiting period to get denied again. So if somebody they're trying to find the right lawyer who really speaks to them, and if they get close to that 60-day window, they need to just appeal themselves and figure out the lawyer part.
I would recommend just send in the piece of paper. I'll even tell you the exact document. It's called an SSA 561, and you can Google it online. It's called a request for reconsideration. The PDF is right there, top of the search page results. So a request for reconsideration. That's most states. I think 47 out of 50 states, you go through that reconsideration process. And then the same exact thing. So, I don't know if you want me to get into the appeal framework, but
yeah,
basically, if you get denied the first time, you request a reconsideration. And this is kind of unfair too, but the same people that denied your claim, or the same type of people, are going to look at your application again and why you were denied. And then they'll either reverse it and grant you benefits, but most times they're going to deny again. They're going to rubber stamp the initial denial. So reconsideration, we've won cases at reconsideration, and it's awesome for the lawyers and it's awesome for the client, because you don't even need to go to a hearing and the person gets their benefits. But that's not, when we tell people, we say, look, you're probably going to get denied again. Like, you're hiring a lawyer because you want us to represent you in a hearing. But every now and then we're successful. You can file a really good paper appeal. But yeah, you have 60 days, you file that, you go through reconsideration, and then that can be another 6, 7, 8 months. So now we're already looking at 1.5 years, 18 months, maybe less, 12 to 18 months in there.
So I guess the initial denial is
7, 8
from
months.
people in the Social Security Administration, right? Like bureaucrats somewhere, and maybe in DC, they may be local, like some
usually local, like a local office.
So they will do the initial approval or denial, and then the reconsideration will also be by somebody who works for the Social Security Administration?
Yes, there's this office called the Disability Determination Service office, and I don't want to go into a lesson of federalism, but it is a state-run office that is that administers a federal program. I don't know why they do it that way, but there's like a statewide office in Massachusetts, so your appeal is probably going to go to them, and they're not judges or lawyers. And I always say that I'm not, I don't want to denigrate them, but it changes how like they view the case a little bit. So they're Social Security workers, and they're going to look at your case and approve or deny that appeal. And then once you get that, that's another denial letter you're going to get, or approval letter. But then again, 60 days from that to request a hearing. So the way to think about it is the three main stages: initial application. If you get denied, 60 days. Reconsideration. If you get denied, 60 days to ask for a hearing. So initial application, reconsideration, hearing. And
Is there a lot of paperwork to file in the reconsideration stage? Like, do you write a brief about here's why I think you should reconsider, or is it just they just look at it?
yeah, so you don't, it's not really like lawyering paperwork heavy in that sense. So it's, I mean, you could file your own reconsideration if you wanted to. The advantage of having a lawyer help you at that stage, I think, is to kind of simply to build the relationship with the lawyer so they start to understand your case. They're going to help you get all your medical records together and submit those to the Social Security Administration. And then a good Social Security disability lawyer at that stage too will start to create these specific questionnaires for your doctors that are shaped in the language that the Social Security administrators speak. And it's sort of this medical vocational language that combines what your diagnosis is with really kind of weird jargon around the world of work. I mentioned like the sit stand and like there's things called like fine grain fingering and that kind of stuff, like what you do with your fingers.
Huh.
And yeah, it gets really, really specific. So you need to understand how to frame the questions to a doctor. So, they speak the language of medicine and transfer that into the language of vocation. So that's where a lawyer can help you. But really like the briefs and like the legal arguments, those don't come into play as much until you're going into a hearing.
Okay. So let's talk about the hearing. Let's change hearing to number 7. Number 7, like let's talk about the hearing itself. So after you get that reconsideration denial, then you go to a hearing in front of an administrative law judge.
Your request 60 days.
60 days after the reconsideration, again, another deadline.
Yeah.
And then you eventually will go in front of an administrative law judge. What does that look like?
Yeah. And this is where, my law partner, my father, Jack, he did this for a long time. You're going in front of someone like him. And it's a unique area of the law because it's, in criminal defense, you have a prosecutor on the other side, you have the judge, oftentimes you have the jury. So there's all these sort of different parties involved, and there's all this procedure, and it's very kind of strict in that sense. In Social Security disability, I would call it much more informal. So your hearing is just a judge, yourself, your lawyer if you have a lawyer. Some people don't. And then there's a vocational expert. There's no lawyer on the other side arguing that you're not disabled. It's basically you're going in front of a judge, and that judge is supposed to be a neutral arbiter of making a determination about whether or not you're disabled. The vocational expert is there to kind of speak about, they'll get questions about what jobs exist for someone with this sort of skill set or abilities. And your lawyer can kind of do a sort of cross-examine of that vocational expert. And then your lawyer is also going to kind of make the case in front of the judge about your own disability, your own abilities. But a lot of what that hearing is the judge talking to you, the claimant, directly talking to the claimant and asking them about, their life, their disability, their activities of daily, are they building birdhouses, how their disability affects them, what their work history is like, whether they seem sort of, like they're faking it or not. And your own lawyer can kind of ask you questions as well. But it's this very unique system it's really not like any other area of the law, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's very judge dependent, I would say. I mean, other areas are too, but this is like, the judge is sort of can sometimes act as the prosecutor.
So the judge, you go through this process, and the vocational expert, are they somebody that works with Social Security Administration?
Technically, they're supposed to be independent.
Okay. So they basically, like, if you talk about your client before with agoraphobia,
Agoraphobia. Yeah.
and so the vocational expert might say, well, they could have a job working from home or something like that. And
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of what the hearing is about.
Yeah.
Do they have
Yep.
jobs they could do? Is that basically it?
Yeah, that's a big part of it. There's this sort of whole, like, for the lawyers, you'll know what this is, but the legal fiction, it basically means the expert will make something up. And there's this idea of what jobs exist in the economy for somebody. So, like, somebody who, let's say they have a really bad back, they're dealing with a lot of back pain. The pain is distracting them from being able to work, and they can't really interact with the public. The expert might make up some job like that existed in 1970 or 1980 and say, well, they could do this job. So then you have to, yeah, it's a real thing. And some of the jobs I bring up are like laughable. It's like documents, like envelope stuffer or something like that. Like, and then it's the lawyer's job to kind of object to that and say, like, where are you getting these numbers from? I know you're an expert, but like, when was the last time you placed somebody in that job? Or so you kind of get into these sort of like legal fiction arguments over jobs and what jobs actually exist. So it gets pretty strange pretty quickly. And there's a lot of there's been countless cases that go up to federal courts over sort of the voodoo jobs magic that the Social Security Administration does. I mean, that's what it is. Honestly, it's.
So what if we get to a hearing? How long are we talking about between initial application and this hearing?
Yeah, and it's funny because these hearings will oftentimes last less than an hour, but the process to get to a hearing, I'm average 18 months.
Wow. So a year and a half to get to this hearing, and how long does it take to get to a decision?
Then the judge will oftentimes kind of speak in code to the lawyer, and the lawyer can kind of read the tea leaves and say, okay, this judge is going to rule in favor or not. But the actual written decision probably won't come out for another 3 or 4 weeks.
Okay, so
which is actually kind of fast.
Yeah, that is very fast for the federal government.
Yeah,
so 3 to 4 weeks.
Maybe longer though. Maybe some judges are longer. And then they're typically pre-government shutdown, like this recent government shutdown, and pre sort of like Trump administration, Social Security Administration cuts. I think they cut like 20% of the workforce. You were probably going to get your payments started. You have your hearing date like November 1st. You're probably going to get, and you were successful, you would probably get your payments started before the end of the year.
Okay, so
like
a month or two. Do you get back benefits? Okay,
yes,
so you get the benefits that you had for the last you're supposed to have for the last 18 months. Too.
Yeah, and this is where, like, that's a great question, because this is how the business side of Melanson Law Group operates. You don't typically, sometimes, we have different arrangements for different clients for a variety of reasons, but 95% of clients we take on a contingency fee basis.
Oh, okay, so they don't get paid.
Yeah,
they don't pay you anything unless you win.
Exactly.
Basically.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, people often associate that with like personal injury attorneys if you get in a car accident, but we do a similar model. And if you apply, November 1st, 2025, I'm going to make it easier on myself. If you apply January 1st, 2026, and you get approved for benefits in like July 2027, that's 19 months. That's 19 months of back pay, with the one caveat that they don't start the timer until 5 months after you apply. And 5 months after the onset of your disability, which is medically determined. That's determined by the judge. So you could apply January 1st of 2026, but if you stopped working in late 2024, then that's when your onset of disability is going to basically be like 5 months after you stop working. You're kind of getting into the details here, but the broad way to think about it is for every month that you go by waiting after the onset of your disability, that adds to your back due benefit sort of pile. And we can talk about how much your benefit amount would be, but let's just say it's like $1,500. then, if you do wait for 20 months, you could have a sizable check waiting for you at the end. It's a lot of waiting. And then your lawyer is going to take a portion of that. So if you're successful, that's how we get paid. So we don't get any money up front. And then we get a portion of your back to benefits, and we can only take 25% of that, or $9,200, whichever is lower. So it's statutorily capped. So it's really, your lawyers aren't going to buy a boat with your case. I think in my mind, it's they're getting a fair amount for their work, and it can be really valuable for you to get a good lawyer.
So a quick question too. So if you get denied after the hearing, is it possible to appeal it to an Article 3 judge in federal court?
Yes. So, but there's one more hoop you have to jump through. It's called the Appeals Council. So it's very arcane, but it's basically you appeal. Again, if you get denied by a judge, 60 days, you have to file your Appeals Council appeal, and your lawyer basically sends a brief to the Appeals Council. They're in D.C. or Maryland. I forget where exactly, but they're in a federal office, and some ALJs, a panel of ALJs, will look at your case, and they will, if they find in your favor on the appeal, the most likely outcome is going to be you get a new hearing. So they kick it back to a new judge, usually hopefully a new judge. If they deny you, if the Appeals Council denies you, then you have another 60 days to file a federal complaint. So now we've reached our fifth level of appeal.
Yeah.
And we filed a few federal complaints ourselves in the District of Mass. And we've been successful. I would say we've technically been successful in all of our complaints. We were really successful on one complaint where we got the federal judge to say that our client is owed benefits. So the federal judge basically awarded benefits. But your typical result at federal, if you're successful, is a new hearing as well. So you can go up the ladder of appeal, kick back down to hearing, back up. We had a client who had 2 hearings prior to us taking her on, and she had 2 hearings. I think she'd had 2 different law firms. We filed a federal complaint. We got kicked up to District of Mass. This is the first time the Social Security process that you're going to have a prosecutor on the other side, or a government attorney on the other side, a solicitor. And we basically had a sort of settlement with them where they agreed to kick it down to a new hearing. So we didn't even have a hearing with the federal judge. Had that new hearing, that was like our client's 3rd total hearing. And we were successful there. So that was
wow.
Third
time's the charm.
Month. Yeah, 3rd time's the charm, I guess. But the appeals process, long story short, the appeals process is crazy. There's actually there's a law firm that's dedicated to only doing federal Social Security appeals. And a lot of Social Security attorneys work with them because they don't, it's a lot to be doing Social Security and then try and worry about federal appeals. We kind of just did a few of our own federal appeals, but it's not like the core of our practice, but by any means.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit with the time we have left about what happens if you get accepted. So number 8 is, can I work when I'm on disability?
Yeah, so you can work a little bit. Technically, you can work a little bit. So your benefit amount. I don't have a quick and dirty formula for you. That's one of those things we talked about with the work credits. Social Security voodoo math. You need to just find that out for yourself. What your benefit amount is going to be. And they'll tell you, but they're not going to hide the ball there. But let's just say it's going to be between $1,500, $1,600, $1,700, $1,800 a month for most people. I mean, we've had clients that have a $3,000 a month benefit payment just because they worked a long time. They were making a decent amount of money. And so it scales with how much money you made. It scales with how much you worked. But your typical payment is going to be in that sort of high teens for SSDI. So SSI is much lower. And SSI, you might get $600, $700, $800 a month. Maybe on the upper end, 900 or 1,000. But any money you take in, whether that's in-kind contributions or even other government benefits, that's going to be subtracted from your monthly payment. So Social Security SSI is very strict, and you're not getting a lot of money from it.
Okay, so you can work some amount while you're on disability, but it's sort of it depends on a lot of things, and it would decrease your benefit.
For SSI, it's going to decrease your benefit. And then for SSDI, the key is not to go over SGA. We talked about that earlier. So substantial gainful activity, that $1,600 amount or whatever it is. It's very important you don't go over that a month, and that's a pretty low amount. That's for a lot of jobs. That's like a week and a half of work or something like that, and you got to be really careful about that. So some people are able to work 10, 20 hours a month, and it kind of keeps them busy. It kind of matches with what their ability is, and that's usually fine. Um, the issue with even working under SGA is that you could potentially run into what's called a continuing disability review, and they might review your case on an ongoing basis to see if you're still disabled. And if you're
Okay.
working like 19 hours a month or 20 hours a month and you're right under SGA, and you haven't been going to your doctor much, you don't have a lot of updated medical treatment, you could be at risk for basically a denial, like a
Oh, so they could
revocation
still.
of your benefits.
Oh, wow. So, I know you talked before about the benefits, so let's move on to number 9. What is the benefit based on, and what are the ranges for both SSI and SSDI?
Yeah, so in terms of like the financial amount you're going to get,
Yeah.
yeah, so it's based on SSDI. Your benefit's going to be based on basically your income prior to becoming disabled, and how much you worked. And so if you made a good amount of money prior, we've had people that are one of our clients was like a cybersecurity executive, and she got on SSDI after a lot of back issues, and um, her payment was like north of $3,000.
Hmm.
She was an IT executive. Um, for a lot of people, that their payment is going to be, if you're making 40, 50, 60, $70,000 a year for a good amount of your life, then your payment is probably going to be in the like 12 to 1800 range. But or it could be up to like 2500. So it's a pretty wide range, and it really depends on how much you were making before. And then for SSI, there's no real calculation there. It's just the SSI base number, which I think right now is $800 or $900, and then they subtract all the money that or in kind benefits that you're getting. So most often we see is like, and some things are excluded. I believe food assistance is excluded, but in Massachusetts we have this program called transitional assistance, which is a temporary sort of income supplemental program, that basically if you go into poverty, and you can apply for this and get some money for about a year and a half or something. So that money would be subtracted from your SSI payment.
Hmm.
So it's really, and I don't have all the exclusions and everything in front of me because it's pretty complicated, but you got to it's really easy for that SSI payment to be whittled away. So, SSI, it can be a good program for some people, but it's a very tedious, precarious program, and they don't make it easy on you.
Oh, yeah, definitely. That's one thing I've learned. So basically, talk to a lawyer.
Yeah.
If you have
Yeah.
So last question, number 10 is, what about medical insurance? What about Medicare, Medicaid, all of that?
Mhm.
How does that interact with these?
Yeah, I mean, one of the best things about getting onto SSDI, is that you're going to get onto Medicare as well. You're gonna be given Medicare benefits. So those start out after a certain period, um, and after you're granted disability, but that can be a really really great benefit is getting onto Medicare, because getting onto Medicare on your own, it can be its own process. I don't even know how you get onto Medicare. If you're not on disability or something like that. I haven't concerned myself with that yet, but I know this is a really great way to get onto Medicare. So that's maybe one of the best benefits of it. And then with SSI, I'd actually have to check what the qualifications are. I mean, if you're on SSI, you probably also qualify for Medicare, but I would have to check if you automatically get onto Medicare with SSI. I think you typically do.
Okay. Well, Ned, thanks so much for going through these with us. This was really great, and I think will be a great help to a lot of people who have questions about disability and Social Security.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. Happy to come on here and talk about it. It's what I do during the day. So, yeah, if it can help some people, and if I can potentially help you, please shoot me an email or give me a call. My number is 617-683-1983. That's my office line, and I'll pick it up, and we can talk through your issues. And if I can't help you, I can hopefully point you in the right direction.
And it's melansonlawgroup.com.
melansonlawgroup.com. That's right.
Melanson, S-O-N.
Yep,
right?
S-O-N. Yep.
All right.
Not the C. Some people spell it the C. But.
Yeah. All right. So, Ned, thanks so much. And that was episode 13 of Boston Barristers. Be sure to tune in later for another exciting episode. Thanks, Ned.
Thanks, Matthew. Great talking.